News Talk 1110 WBT at 99.3 FM and WBT.com. Where Charlotte comes to talk. Here's Wayne Powers.
(704-570-1110). If you want in on the conversation, we got Ron Paul coming up. Ron Paul, longtime congressman from Texas, very outspoken individual, tremendously independent, former presidential candidate, and someone who always has something interesting to say, someone who always has an insight that is fresh and uniquely his. Ron Paul, thank you so much for joining us on News Talk 1110 WBT, sir.
Thank you, Wayne. Nice to be with you.
My pleasure, sir. All right, Dr. Paul, I want to talk to you about economic issues and some of the things you've been talking about the gold standard and Fort Knox, etc. But before I do, just on a timely basis, last night we carried the presidential address on Iraq, and you were extremely outspoken on foreign intervention. You tend to be a sort of a non-interventionist and someone who I think has taken George Washington's farewell address advice to heart. So tell me what you think about the president's speech last night, sir.
Well, you know, it was designed, of course, to assure the American people that he is winding the war down as he had promised, and I don't think that's likely to happen. Hopefully there'll be no more Americans killed, but I think a couple have been killed since they have had this no combat rule. But we're leaving 50,000 troops there. We're increasing the number of contractors. There's already 100,000 there. We have an embassy as big as the Vatican. We have permanent military bases there. That's all going to be a resentment and a thorn in the side of all the Iraqis, so there will not be peace over there. Al-Qaeda was one of the excuses for going in there, but there was never any Al-Qaeda there. Saddam Hussein hated Al-Qaeda because he was a secularist, and yet now there is Al-Qaeda, and we really have designed a system, even though they have no government. The strongest politician there is al-Sadr, and he's closely aligned with the Iranians, so that's a bit of an irony that we have saved a country that was strongly opposed to the regime in Iran, have now become close allies. So I see it's all so foolish. I think it's going to continue until we either go bankrupt or we wise up, and I think we'll go bankrupt before we wise up about foreign policy.
Well, you mentioned the Iranian influence now in Iraq, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they had an extremely bloody war, an extended bloody war not that many years ago. I mean,
in the 80s. And, you know, the irony there is we were on Iraq's side. We encouraged them, exactly. and because they just wanted to do anything that could defeat the Iranians. But and then all of a sudden, you know, we encouraged Saddam Hussein to invade Iran. But when he invaded and really got a clear signal to invade Kuwait, you know, that was a logical approach for him, but it was not a conventional, or it wasn't an expected response from us, because that's when we lowered the boom, and said, oh, you're no longer our friend. So we've been fighting over there since 1991. This war has been going on since 1991. You know, all through the 90s, we were bombing and regulating. You know, they couldn't fly, no-fly zones.
Well, we were being shot at on a daily basis in the no-fly zone.
Yeah, but if somebody flew over our country, we'd shoot at them, too. You know, why wouldn't they want to shoot at us?
Well, it was part of the UN sanctions, wasn't it, the no-fly zone?
Oh, yeah, but if we'd have been on the receiving end of that, nobody in this country would have been happy.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of sovereignty.
I just don't think. I think the fact that we started our involvement in 1991 has to be recognized, because why did we invade Iraq? Because just a few years before that, we were encouraging Iraq to invade their neighbors.
Right.
So I don't like the inconsistency. One day, I mean, we were during the Afghan war, when the Soviets were in Afghanistan, we were Osama bin Laden's ally. You know, helped him, send him some Stingers, you know, missiles. So it's this business of on again, off again.
Well, Libya is another example now.
Yeah, now we're treating them, and the oil people now are making contracts over there.
So what about Afghanistan, Dr. Paul?
Well, I think we're going to have the same failure that every nation that has ever tried to occupy Afghanistan in 1,000 years. I mean, it's going to fail. There's not a chance in the world. We can tell the Afghans to live like us. It's just a wasted time and wasted money. If we want them to be like us, we ought to set an example for them, and they would want to look to us and emulate us. Matter of fact, when there was less outside interference in Afghanistan in the 40s and the 50s, they were much more westernized. Somebody had some pictures the other day of people in downtown business offices walking around in westernized business suits. But it's been since when outsiders come in, it's the incentive for the radicals to organize. There was no Al Qaeda unless there's a reason, and that's why what we do over there, even all these invasions, really is a blessing to Osama bin Laden, because that's a recruiting tool for him. So the more we're involved, the more radicalized they get, and the more we're in danger. I see that we're in greater danger now, not less danger, because we're over there. Because it's like Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with 9/11. Yet probably 60 or 70% of the American people still believe, oh yeah, we had to go there, kill him over there because he came over here and killed us. Well, that's not true. And the philosophy of the Taliban is that they just want to get rid of occupiers. They're not as aggressive as Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda will come over here, but the Taliban are just organizers to undermine any foreign occupation in their country, which is it's really pretty logical. What would we do if we had a foreign occupier? We would be organized, and we'd be shooting at them all the time.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in World War II, the French resistance was famous for
right.
it. And it's human instinct. But at some point, you can break the back of a resistance if you have popular support. But that's another issue entirely.
Right.
All right, Dr. Paul, you've run for president in the past. So if I could wave my WBT magic wand and say, Dr. Paul, you are now President Paul in the White House, what would you do tomorrow morning in the international scene? How would you fix this?
Well, I would announce that the foreign policy would change, and I am very, very respectful of the Congress and their prerogatives. And I think one of the problems we have in this country is Congress has reneged on those prerogatives. They let presidents go to war without declarations, and monetary policy is taken over, and the Congress is just totally negligent.
Now, that dates back to what, the Korean War?
Yeah.
Or the Korean police conflict?
Yeah, that's right. But the president is the commander-in-chief, so when it comes to moving troops around, the president has a lot of leeway, just like the announcement this week. The president absolutely has the authority to do exactly what he said. I just wished it was true and he was doing more. I'm bringing the troops home. Well, I would more likely said, all the troops are going to be out of there in 6 months. We're done. Get busy. Take care of this. Have your election. Find it. But we're not going to babysit you anymore. We're broke. We need to spend our money back home, and we just can't do it anymore. And I would let the Iranians feel threatened. We put on sanctions, which is blockades. That's literally an act of war. I would move the Navy back. Just back off a little bit. Give them a little breathing room. Talk to people, but not always threatening people with bombs and killing or bribes. We get two things. We said, do what we tell you and we'll give you money. If you don't, we'll bomb you. But just think of how well we're doing with the Vietnamese now. We've won Vietnam because we finally started talking to them and trading with them, and they're westernized, and we invest in Vietnam. And yet, when I was drafted in the 60s, our people were sent over there to kill them. It just made no sense then. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. The founders were right about advising, engagement and talking and trading with people. And yes, there's a lot of imperfections in the world, and a lot of these other countries have bad people in them, but that's their problem. We have a lot of imperfections here. That's our job. Our responsibility is to deal with our imperfections.
Can you stay with me for a few more minutes? I want to talk about the economy, and I've got to take a quick break. Can you?
Okay,
All right.
will.
More with Ron Paul.
Where Charlotte comes to talk.
How much gold is actually in Fort Knox? You've always heard there's tons. How come we don't know? How much gold is there? Dr. Paul wants to find out. We'll find out more from him. News Talk 1110 WBT.
Crater Media Charlotte. Here's Wayne Powers.
All right, Wayne Powers in, and we're on the line with Texas Congressman Dr. Ron Paul, former presidential candidate, and he is a member of 3 committees in the House of Representatives. One is the Joint Economic Committee, also the Committee on Foreign Affairs. We've talked to him about foreign affairs briefly. He's on the Joint Economic Committee. He's also on the Committee on Financial Services, where he's a ranking member on the subcommittee on Domestic Monetary Policy and Technology, and also on the subcommittee on Oversight and Investigation. So it's only fitting, Dr. Paul, that I ask you about this latest call that you've put out, and I need to know more about it. You are calling for an audit of the gold in Fort Knox.
Right, and it's probably going to be a little broader than Fort Knox because all the gold that we're supposed to own isn't in Fort Knox. There's some in New York. So it's auditing our gold reserves.
Would that be at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's nobody can give me a straight answer on exactly.
Dr. Paul, can I stop you for 1 second because I'm confused already, and I apologize.
Okay.
But isn't the Federal Reserve Bank of New York a private corporation?
Well, it's private in the sense that the government didn't pay to build the building, but they're very much involved in the Federal Reserve System, and the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Board is a creature of the Congress. So it's very secretive, it's very private in that sense, but it's unique. It's totally unique of anything else that we have in this country, and yet it has the power to create money out of thin air.
It's then acceptable and makes sense then for federal assets, for government assets to be stored in a private institution like this?
Well, not as far as I'm concerned, but that's the way it's been done. In the past, I don't even believe in the Federal Reserve System.
You've read The Creature from...
the people should be holding the gold. You should have your gold coins.
Thank you, sir. I mean, you read The Creature from Jekyll Island too, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. So if we had free market banking, banks would have to have gold reserves. And yes, that gold, but they would own the gold to back up the currency that they have to, or the loans that they make. But under these circumstances, if it's just storage, it isn't very appropriate. But our problem is we don't know what's there. Maybe they had a decent audit in the 50s, the best I can tell. They pretended they had one in the 70s, but it wasn't authentic. And the whole point is if the people should know, we should know in the Congress, maybe we might have to go on to a gold standard someday once they ruin this paper money. It'd be nice to know for sure that the gold is there and it belongs to the United States and the people.
Why haven't we had an audit? Why don't we know what our gold reserves are?
Not enough people cared about it, but they're starting to. Nobody cared about the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has had a free ride for so long. They've always gotten credit for good times, and if there are bad times, they get credit for us getting out of the recessions. And it should be the other way around. They should be blamed for the bubbles and also the bursting of these bubbles.
And yet our answer to the latest economic crisis was to further empower the Federal Reserve. Am I wrong?
That's right. They ended up getting a lot more power, and I tried to get into that bill, at least the auditing of the Federal Reserve. I mean, during the crisis, they created $2 trillion, and they bought up bad assets, and they bought some from their friends, and they skipped the people they didn't want, and we don't even know who they are. And they bought assets, at nominal value, and they might have been worth 10 cents on the dollar. They bought up all those derivatives, these housing mortgage derivatives. It's criminal. So this is the very first step should be audit, not only the entire Federal Reserve, but right now, if we'd have had the audit of the entire Federal Reserve, we'd have been able to check on the gold. The bill that I'm talking about that I'll introduce at the beginning of next year will deal with proving whether or not they have the gold.
And the argument against auditing the Federal Reserve, I mean, you didn't get that through. What was the argument against it? Why wouldn't we want to know and have the information? Who could possibly be against the Congress of the United States having the information that they need about the economic system of this country?
What they argued was if we knew what they were going to do, then we'd have something to say about monetary policy, and then Congress would become more in charge on monetary policy than the Federal Reserve, and only they they know what is right.
So they're afraid that you might issue some more United States notes?
Yeah, something like that. But my bill didn't even want to go that far along. Mine excluded management of the monetary policy. All I want to know is what they've been doing, and who gets the bailouts, and who their friends are, and which corporations benefit, and especially what they do on their international transaction. They can make loans and guaranteed loans to other central banks and other governments and international financial organizations.
How can people help you lobby for this bill?
The same way they help me to get 320 co-sponsors of auditing the Fed. They get hold of their congressman and say, look, we want you to be on this bill to find out whether or not the gold is there.
And if you go to WaynePowers.com, you click on Ron Paul's picture, it'll take you right to his official website. You can find out a lot more there. 2 quick questions, Dr. Paul. Are you going to run in 2012?
Don't know. It's too early to tell.
Okay.
I haven't ruled it out, but I certainly haven't put the plans out for that yet.
And one last question. I can't let you go without asking you. How does it feel to be Rand Paul's daddy in the news these days?
Well, somebody asked me once, what does he ask me to call him? Do I have to address him as Senator Paul? And I said, no, he hasn't asked that, but he wants me to quit calling him Randy.
Dr. Paul, thanks for joining us. I hope we get a chance to chat again soon.
Thanks a lot. Good to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
News Talk 1110, WBT.